Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of Trump or thin-skin to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. And the logical fallacy we're looking at this week is the counterfactual fallacy, also known as argumentum ad speculum, the speculative fallacy, and hypothesis contrary to facts.
So I think the speculative fallacy is quite a good name for this one, because basically it is when people speculate that if things were different, if situations were different, then a particular situation would happen. They basically are saying they know the outcome in a hypothetical situation. Yeah. And there are times when that is possible. For example, if someone has said what they plan to do if they get a job, and then if you said, well, if that person gets a job, they'll do this because they've already said that, that's not contrary to facts. Where it's a fallacy is where you don't really necessarily have a basis for saying it, or in some cases the opposite might be true and it's just as likely.
Yeah. If you didn't get that job and then you said, well, if I'd have got that job, I would have done it differently. There's no way of proving that. And
or more. It's almost more so things that you might not even have control over. So if I'd got that job, then the company would have done much better. That's something you can't necessarily control or don't have full control over. With your example, if you could say if I got that job, I would have more money. That's probably fair if it pays more than the job you have at the moment. So there are times when you can say if then, which makes sense and you have facts to back it up, and there are times when you don't. So I have a couple of examples from Trump, which I'm going to kind of play one after the other because they're basically very similar to each other.
Don't forget, that time they said, oh, Trump is saying these horrible things. He's going to get us into a war. You're going to have a war. If I wasn't elected, you'd be in a war. And President Obama essentially said the same thing. He was ready to go to war. You would have had a war and you would have lost millions, not thousands. You would have lost millions of people.
And the second clip is this one.
The economy would have been so bad had I not gotten elected. And it wasn't great under Obama.
So he's saying if he hadn't been elected, then a particular thing would have happened. His claim for us having a war, and he's talking about Korea in this instance, if he hadn't been elected, and there could have been a war under Obama and Obama was ready to go to war, is something he said before. It's not true. Obama looked at the situation in North Korea, saw that it was bad, considered the possibility of invading, but decided actually that it wasn't a good idea because all kinds of bad things could happen. So he'd already ruled it out. But Trump has said a number of times that if it wasn't for him, there would have been a war with North Korea.
Right. Who knows? There could still be one.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
there's no evidence for that whatsoever.
No.
And similarly for the economy, there's absolutely no evidence that if Trump hadn't got in, that the economy would have been bad, because the economy had been going up in the last years of Obama's presidency. So he's continued an upward trend.
And it's kind of the other way of looking at those things he's often laid claim to when he said, because of me, fewer planes have crashed. And he's kind of said, if you'd have continued to have had Obama in, if I hadn't have won, more planes would have crashed. It's that kind of idea, isn't it, with the economies? He's always taken credit for things that are generally going up.
Yeah, so there is definitely a bit of post hoc ergo propter hoc in there, where he's saying that these things are due to him being in there. There's also, this is really kind of a specific case of a fallacy called denying the antecedent. We mentioned denying the antecedent very briefly before. It's a formal logical fallacy, and it's where you say P then Q if not P, therefore not Q. So,
Right.
as an example, you might say, if it was raining, the sidewalk would be wet. It's not raining, therefore the sidewalk is not wet. And that's not the case, because there's all kinds of other reasons why the sidewalk might be wet. So what he's saying is, I am president and we're not at war. If I wasn't president, we would be at war.
We would be at war. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So, and it's also a false dichotomy as well, isn't it? Because he's eliminated all of the other possibilities and just narrowed it down to the fact that, you should thank your lucky stars that I am president, because without me, all sorts of corrupt things might have. Oh, no, wait a minute. What am I saying? Yeah. So, he really does he is covering all the bases, isn't he? Both the positive side and the negative side. Both the positive, the if P, then Q, and the negatives. If not P, then not Q. Yeah. He's doing it all.
It can be used for kind of hypothesizing things that might happen in the future. On the 3rd of November, just before the elections in Virginia, Trump tweeted, "Virginia has the best unemployment and economic numbers in the history of the state. If the Democrats get in, those numbers will go rapidly in the other direction. On Tuesday, vote Republican." Now, he was kind of ignoring the fact that Virginia has a Democratic governor and lieutenant governor and hasn't, in fact, elected a Republican statewide since 2009. But... he was basically saying the reason that their economic numbers and their unemployment is so great is because of the Republicans. So you should keep the Republicans in office. And the elections were essentially for the state Senate and the state House, and the Republicans did get in because Trump went to Virginia and did a rally on behalf of the people who were trying to get in, and he was unsuccessful because people don't like him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So there was a bit of a blue wave in Virginia. So we'll see. I guess we'll be able to actually see whether he was right, and if the Democrats get in, the unemployment numbers and the economic numbers go in the other direction.
And now is the time, I think, for Mark's British politics corner.
So we're going to boot this off with Boris, who announced the election. We're in full pre-election fever at the moment. Where Boris announced the election on the 6th of November, stepped outside number 10 Downing Street and said, "I've just been to visit Her Majesty the Queen. She invited me to dissolve the Parliament and begin an election process." And then he kind of gave a speech, and what it's included in that speech is an argumentum ad speculum, which is not dissimilar to the second clip. So let's hear this one.
And so it's been frankly mind-boggling in the last few weeks to see how Parliament first voted to approve this deal and then voted for delay. And I'm afraid that it is clear that if Parliament had its way, then this country would not be leaving even on January the 31st. I'm afraid I also think that this delay is now bad for the country and for the economy. And with every week that goes by, uncertainty is deterring people from hiring new staff, from buying new homes, from making new investments. And if we can get this deal over the line with a sensible majority government, we certainly can, then we can release that pent-up flood of investment. Hundreds of billions are waiting to pour into the UK, and we can inject a surge of confidence into our system.
It's all speculation. That I think the one that it starts off with is that if Parliament had its way, the country would not be leaving even on January the 31st, which is some kind of convoluted, tense arrangement, grammatically speaking, that we would only have learned if you'd learned French at school or did Latin. That's probably the imperfect future continuum. Yes, exactly. Yeah, would not be this. It's like that for the football commentators who always say that was always going to be going in. So there's kind of it would have always been.
Also, in what way has Parliament not had its way?
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens when Parliament votes.
Yeah, if it had his way. So what he's complaining about is that Parliament voted for the deal. They agreed with his the deal that he came back triumphant, having scrubbed out the bits that the EU didn't like. You know, like the economic border between the Britain and Ireland, and which were terrible thing to have done, and then announced it to the Parliament. Parliament kind of went, yeah, okay, we agree with that. And then what we don't agree with is that we've got to get through all this legislation in 3 days. And like we said last episode, it'd take you 3 days just to read the deal. It is several hundreds of pages long, and they were expected to vote through on every single point that had been raised, every single nuance and every change that he had brought about since Theresa May's deal, the one that people voted out 3 times, including him. And that's how Parliament had its way. It was doing parliamentary things. And I don't get how Parliament had not had its way, because they had its way, and then he attributed them the notion of Parliament thwarting him in his efforts to get us out of the EU, that he would say he'd rather die in a ditch than see happen. The ditch is feeling a bit let down at the moment. He's going, you even lied to me. So it's very odd. So it has had its way. And the whole thing about it won't be leaving even on January 31st, that's an allusion to the fact we got another extension. He had to go, he has to write to the EU and say, we need another extension. And then he wrote another letter saying, yeah, we don't really. And and then
my mum made me write that one.
My mum made me write it, yeah. You signed
not
my
really,
mum.
Sorry.
Yeah, not really, yeah. Sorry, not really. Yeah, sad, not sad. And the other bit is, I think, which is the speculatory bit, is that this will release the pent-up flood of investments. Hundreds of millions are waiting to come and invest in Britain. Well, like the Tesla factory that Elon Musk has decided not to build in Britain because of Brexit. So he was going to build a gigafactory. I guess that's slightly bigger than a mega factory.
It's 1 million factories, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. Is it 1 million? Yeah. No, it's more than that. It's 1 million, because if a killer factory is 1,000, a mega's 1 million. No,
you're right. No, it's 1,000. Yeah. Right. Or 1,024 times 1,024 anyway.
Yeah, of factories. Yeah, he was gonna build one of those, or a million of them. But no, he isn't. So that's some of the hundreds of millions of stuff. Well, it's all speculation, because every time Boris opens his mouth, the speculation is, is he going to say something true? and he isn't. No. But what's very interesting is the next clip is going back to the person who will hereinafter be known as the father of Brexit, David Cameron, who was Prime Minister and called the referendum. He's maintaining now it was against his better judgment, blah, 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 blah. He did a round of interviews on TV, hawking his book, which was called Stupid Things I've Done in My Life or something like that. And he said his publishers weren't going to publish it till after Brexit. And then that was 3 years later. They're going, well, we've got to get this off our books somehow. Otherwise we're just going to be sitting on this thing. We'd just pulp the whole lot. So they put it out. What's interesting is that he uses almost exactly the same language that Boris does. He even starts it with frankly. Here we go.
Frankly, I would say if people in Parliament had voted for the deal that Theresa May put together, we would have Brexited by now, and perhaps we'd be in a position of greater certainty. And I'd also say, in spite of the difficult consequences that have followed, the British economy after we left continued to grow. We continue to get more people into work.
Which is very odd. I don't know. I think he's been reading too much Robert Frost, The Road Less Travelled. So he's kind of, he said, so not only did he say what Boris said, which is, if only you'd voted for that deal, it would have all happened by now, and we'd be in a better the certainty comes up.
The first part is true. It's if people had voted for the deal and agreed to do it, then we would have done
leave.
It.
We would have left.
That's fair. But
but
it was a terrible deal, so it wouldn't have resulted in good things. It would have resulted in bad things.
But then he goes on to say, maybe the certainty that everybody's saying, we would have certainty. We're certainly going to be worse off. That's the certainty. So we're certainly not going to have Elon Musk investing in our country. And the other thing that he then goes on to, in his kind of weird alternative timeline, he actually says, and the presenters don't call him up on it, actually one of them goes, in agreement. He says, despite the difficult consequences that followed, the British economy after we left continued to grow and we continued to get more people into work. Well, we haven't left and it hasn't grown. Yeah. So we didn't. So I don't know where the timeline he's living is. So he's actually living in this speculatory future. The one where it got through, the economy is growing, all's well with the world. People are sufficiently well off to want to buy his autobiography. And that's the thing. And actually, I kind of fact checked this, not using the Tory party's fake fact check one, which we'll find out about in a minute. The UK Financial Times did this little thing that says the UK economy in 6 charts. So you just kind of, since Brexit, what's gone on. And they say the economy hasn't improved, hasn't grown since. It's got worse. We're now amongst the lowest performing economies in the EU. We were amongst the highest before the referendum. And the other thing is, they say he's not that wrong about employment going up, but it looks like that's due to an increase in self-employment because people have gone into business because they can't find a job with an employer. So it's a kind of an artificial rise. And it's odd that he's still claiming that everything's fine, even though we haven't left. He's saying we have left and the economy's grown anyway. And which then reminded me of a similar comment replying to a Remain voters comment on a John Redwood's blog. And John Redwood was a Brexiteer Tory MP. And they say, if only you voted Leave, you would have been spared all this stress. Which you can't. So basically, no, you wouldn't, because you just swap your Remain stress for Leave stress. So the people did vote to leave, and there is still stress. So it's and it was seen that the leavers have their own stress. So that's quite an interesting one too. There's a couple of bonus examples I've came across on a tweet today, I think. No, 21st of November. So there was an article in the independent newspaper which has spotted the second occurrence of the Conservatives doing dystopian digital warfare. Basically, the Conservatives set up a fake website purporting to contain Labour's manifesto, which was launched on the 21st, in a bid to trick voters looking for the document. Basically, they paid Google to promote the website labourmanifesto.co.uk towards the top of its results for people searching for that plan. In defence of that, the EU's own Brexit coordinator described it as a dystopian action, and a Conservative Party spokesman said the party makes no apologising for highlighting what Jeremy Corbyn has made clear himself time and again, adding that he doesn't have a plan for Brexit, and without that, he has no credibility on everything else. So I think that in terms of an argumentum ad speculum, is if only he had a plan for Brexit, then his other ideas would have credibility. And they're not. That's not true, because they have credibility on their own terms. The Conservatives are pushing this idea that because we don't know which way he's going to vote in the referendum that he is proposing to have on any new deal, a new referendum on which would be about, do you want to leave on these terms that we've just negotiated, or do you want to remain? The Conservatives are maintaining that because we don't know how he's going to vote, then the rest of everything that he's got to say is nonsense. So they're speculating that he might vote to remain, in which case all of this manifesto is pointless because we would be in the EU, or he might vote to leave, in which case this manifesto is pointless because we'd be a lot worse off and we wouldn't be able to get all the money. So, in response to that, Mike Galsworthy, who is the founder of Scientists for EU, tweeted, if the Conservatives thought Labour's manifesto was bad, they wouldn't feel compelled to divert audience from it. So they have kind of, there's a nice little speculation there, because what they have done is you click on labourmanifesto.co.uk and it sends you off to a Tory party site that says Corbyn is going to tax the rich and spaff it all up the wall. And he's saying, well, yeah, if they thought it was bad, why didn't they just point them at it to go and read it instead of sending them off? And a friend of mine, friend of the show, Gordon Charlton, on Facebook posted today a similar thing. He said, when you've been the party in power for 9.5 years, you don't need to slander, belittle or smear the opposition. You don't need to set up fake websites or falsify your Twitter account or post doctored videos. You don't need to deceive, cheat or lie. All you need to do is list your glorious achievements. Oh, wait.
If I could reach the stars, I'd give them all to you. Then you'd love me like you used to do. It's just a fallacy, a wild fallacy. It's a fallacy, it's a fallacy in the wild.
There you go, share there with If I Could Turn Back Time, which contains the fallacy of speculations, the speculative fallacy. If I could reach the stars and give them all to you, then you would love me like you used to.
Yeah.
It's an it's an uncheckable thing, and it was
frankly,
quite interesting.
If you give someone all the stars, they're going to be too busy being killed by the intense heat to love you at all. So,
yeah, exactly. And that, they're not going to thank you for that, really, are they?
It would be inconvenient to have all the stars.
At the very least, yeah. It would, I think...
If anything, annoying, really, rather than something that would make you love someone.
Yeah, a little bit irritating. I mean, you'd appreciate the gesture, but you kind of go, okay,
the thought
fine.
that counts, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that scenario, yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit like the 12 Days of Christmas, Very annoying. Yes, quite. The interesting thing about singing that was wearing the outfit that she wore on the deck of the destroyer. That was it was quite a bit pinchy, so that hence my going a bit pitchy there. But yeah, there we go.
So in the Fallacy in the Wild, we like to talk about the Fallacy of the Week from a non-political perspective. And this week, one of our first examples, in fact, is from Friends. And
Yay!
It's two clips from the same episode, because this involves a brilliant callback joke where this is an episode where Chandler is smoking again and is a little bit irritable because the others are trying to get him to quit smoking. And it's the one where the gang goes, Ross is kind of slightly out in the cold from the rest of the friends. He's not part of the group at this point because he and Rachel have had an argument. They're all off going skiing without him. So the beginning of the episode, they're talking about Ross, and this happens.
Oh, that's great. With my luck, that's going to be him.
Him, Ross?
Nope. Him, 253. His eyes are on the sparrow. My parents got divorced. That's when I started using humor as a defense mechanism.
And then later on in the episode, after the break, the team are they're broken down in Phoebe's cab, and Joey has a plan.
Relax, okay? I can get this open. Anybody got a coat hanger?
Oh, I do. Oh, no, wait a minute. I took it out of my shirt when I put it on this morning.
So if your parents hadn't got divorced, you'd be able to answer a question like a normal person?
So there's no evidence that if Chandler's parents hadn't got divorced, he'd be able to answer a question like a normal person.
No.
Even though he claims that his using humour as a defence mechanism started with his parents' divorce.
Purely as a result of,
it's entirely possible that he would still be a bit of a dick to his friends if his parents hadn't got divorced.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And our next example comes from a film 2015 interview with Steven Spielberg.
If you hadn't made Jaws, would your career have still ended up in the same place, do you think, eventually?
If I hadn't made a movie that was such a quantum success, I wouldn't have had the freedom to decide what movie I wanted to make next. I would have been a director for hire, attaching myself to projects that the studios had pre-approved, as opposed to creating my own projects and being able to get a studio to agree to finance a project that they didn't see eye to eye with me on.
So Spielberg is doing the same thing that Trump did. That he is saying what happened was I made Jaws, it was a huge success, and then I was given the freedom to make the films I wanted to make. If I hadn't made Jaws, I wouldn't have had that freedom, and that's probably true immediately after that point. But to suggest that he then would have become a director for hire doing what studios wanted him to do ignores the possibility that having made a different film after, if Jaws hadn't been such a success, but then he made something else which was very popular, or just having another route and people seeing the talent that he had would have led to him being able to make the films that he wanted to make.
Like 1941.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that it goes through this entire thing, and it becomes a kind of reported speech, and it's almost a comedic routine, isn't it? Because he goes to, I wouldn't have been able to get the funding for the things and the freedom to have the final edit, and we wouldn't have seen eye to eye. And, Sam Goldwyn would have slammed the desk and poked his cigar in my face. And it gets more and more kind of ridiculous and more personal and individual and specific, even though it's all a reported future, and in a comedy situation that says more about the speaker than about the truth of what's being said. That's why I chose the next. So I chose a Fallacy in the Wild, and this is Pete Townshend on Sirius XM radio quite recently. Basically, he's on talking about the fact that he's got a new album out. In fact, at the end of this kind of long meandering thing that we're about to hear, he says, "I've just got to butt in on myself." But prior to that, there's just this wonderful bit which I noted down as he just gets lost in this speculation. There's so many different speculative arguments going on, and I'm not really quite sure that he ever gets to the point that he's trying to make, mainly because he interrupts himself in order to say, I'm just going to interrupt myself. The reason I'm saying this doesn't get to the end of the argument, but he goes off on this fantastic flight of fantasy, and here it is.
Imagine that the Beatles were still touring. Imagine that they were still making albums. Imagine that they were a band that continued to make records, like Tom Petty, for example. The late, wonderful Tom Petty continued to make records. The Eagles or, the Stones or anybody like that, constantly trying to make records and to perform and make music that came from their era, the period of their struggle and their breakthrough and their deepest experimentation.
Yeah, there you go. I like the fact that without any irony at all, he's doing a whole bunch of imagines. He's inviting us to speculate that the Beatles were still performing and still making records, like Tom Petty, who is dead. So you kind of go, well, in a way they are making records like Tom Petty because two of them are dead. So there's still
in very
making
similar
records
way.
in the way that Tom Petty is similarly making records. And then you think, well, what's he? Then he's kind of going, okay, well, imagine that they're still making records, but they're still making records like they used to when they were doing it back then. So what's your point? You know, what would be the point of the Beatles continually making records the same as they were making them then? You want new stuff, surely. And it also glosses over the fact that Tom Petty, pardon being dead, did make lots of records actually with members of the Beatles, ex-members of the Beatles. So they were making records. They did continue to make records. Paul McCartney still makes records. A lot more records than Pete Townshend and The Who.
So we're gonna play fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game. I understand the game as well as anybody.
Yes, it's time for Fake News, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news.
Yeah, see, I've realised in the true argumentum ad speculum that if only the choices had been less unclear, I would have been an astronaut by now.
Yes.
You're entirely to blame for my terrible
Your
NASA
lack of
career.
astronauting. Yeah.
My lack of astronaut. The fact that I failed to be spotted by NASA because if only the choices were clearer. Yeah. See, I'm also going to apply what I'm now calling the Robert Frost razor in trying to choose the road less travelled, i.e. getting it right. For me, certainly that's the road less travelled.
Yeah, you're currently on 14 out of 35, which is 40%, I think. Is that right? Yes, that's exactly 40%.
That's a powerful score.
Yeah. It's a nice round number. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the theme this week is sports. In fact, specifically NFL, because of Trump's sometimes antagonistic approach to NFL players. And having been booed recently as he attended games, which was quite entertaining.
Yeah.
But these are pretty much, these ones are all going back a little while. So they're largely about the controversy over kneeling at games, at least the first 2. So statement number 1 is about Nike choosing Colin Kaepernick as their kind of front man.
Yep.
Trump said, "I don't understand what Nike was thinking. They have this guy, he's not a good guy, he disrespects our flag, our beautiful, beautiful national anthem, our country, and they make him the star, and we don't like that. It's not smart business, and everyone knows I'm a very smart businessman."
Okay.
Statement number 2, he was accused of being preoccupied when talking about all the kneeling in NFL games, and he said, "To me, the NFL situation is a very important situation. I've heard that before about was I preoccupied? Not at all, not at all. I have plenty of time on my hands. All I do is work. And to be honest with you, that's an important function of working. It's called respect for our country."
Okay, all I do is work. You don't. Right.
Statement number 3 is about how awful it is that they stop players from getting concussions.
Oh, right. Okay.
He said,
"Yeah,
I watched for a couple of minutes and 2 guys just really a beautiful tackle. Boom, 15 yards. The referee gets on television. His wife is sitting at home. She's so proud of him. They're ruining the game, right? They're ruining the game. Hey, look, that's what they want to do. They want to hit, okay? They want to hit."
Okay, so he's confusing health and safety with political correctness there. Okay. Yeah, and the fact that they wear those helmets can't help. I mean, if you didn't wear a helmet, you wouldn't get the rebounds from inside and everything. Yeah. Okay. Okay. His wife's sitting at home. She's so proud of him. They're ruining the game. Yeah, that is it. Yeah, he generally doesn't like stuff that's politically correct. It's gone mad. Don't worry, they have this guy. He's not a good guy. He disrespects our flags. They make him the star. It's not part of business. What you want is a curmudgeonly ex-reality TV show host to be a star. Very important decision. I heard it before. I was preoccupied. Not at all. Plenty of time. Okay. Right. You'd see, it's the beautiful, beautiful national anthem is very, very Trump. Therefore, it could be very well observed by you and therefore designed to trick me. As is the repeat of not at all, not at all. All I do is work, to be honest with you. The important function of work is called respect for our country. I was preoccupied. So for me, okay, I'm going to plump for, I think, everyone knows the phrase part of businessman. See, does he ever say that out loud? Okay, I think number one is the one that you made up.
Okay, so of the other two, which are you more confident about?
Number three.
Okay, so number three is real.
Oh, I watched for a couple of minutes, and two guys just really beautiful tackle. Boom, 15 yards. The referee gets on television. His wife is sitting at home. She's so proud of him. They're ruining the game. Right? They're ruining the game. Hey, look, that's what they want to do. They want to hit, okay? They want to hit.
It's just, what is it? He's like, he is he's a commentator for a football game, isn't he? It's that kind of stuff. Boom, 15 yards.
Football commentator, but
or one that
he's complained. He thinks that referees give penalties so that their wife can sit at home and go, oh, look, he's given a penalty.
Because he gets on television, and it's important for people to get on television. It's important for him to get on television, so therefore he thinks everybody else needs to get on television. But, it could well be that they broke the rules or they did something that in the rules of the game were illegal.
That say you can't do, tackling too high or that kind of stuff because it's dangerous.
Yeah,
they're trying to protect
you break
people.
The rules. So we know that he's all about sticking to the rules.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And the people just they invent the rules in order to thwart the spirit of the game. That's like they've invented the rules of democracy in order to thwart the ordinary man on the street becoming president.
So you also think that number two is real?
I do. Yes.
And number two.
Yes.
Is.
Yes.
Real.
To me, the NFL situation is a very important situation. I've heard that before about was I preoccupied? Not at all. Not at all. I have plenty of time on my hands. All I do is work. And to be honest with you, that's an important function of working. It's called respect for our country.
So not at all. I have plenty of time in my hands.
It's
all I do is work.
Yeah.
And then he realises, oh no. So actually, that's the important function of working is being preoccupied by football. And
because I have plenty of time on my hands because all I do is work.
All I do is work. What? Well, if so that by inference, then the work that you do it doesn't take any time because all I do is work, but I've got plenty of time on my hands. Okay. Yeah. What is it that you do for work then? Oh, I know, tweet. Yeah.
It's very important. Respecting the country. He full-time respects the country.
Yeah, he does that. It's an important function of work. He spends nothing but respecting the we know, because he will hug a flag at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Which means that number one is fake news. And you have won. I can't take the credit this week.
Okay.
For this loss, because these...
That's a very Trump press agent thing to say.
Because these quotes were actually suggested by a listener.
Hey!
They were submitted by friend of the show, Chris Cole, who thought it was about time we had some sports-related quotes. And,
nice.
Yeah,
good work, Chris.
Submitted these. So, unfortunately, didn't fool you.
No. So that, now, are you now maintaining by inference that if you had written it, there you go, just speculative thing. If you had written it, then I would have not spotted that.
You would have been on 14 out of 36 now, but
exactly,
fact, 15 out of 36.
15 out of 35. 36, yeah.
36, yeah, which is for nearly 42%.
Oh, I say.
Yeah. And
wow.
Since that made up quote was about Colin Kaepernick, might as well mention Colin Kaepernick's coming back because he's been doing kind of he had a trial with the NFL, a workout at least, where he showed that his arm is still good. He's been practicing, he's been keeping in shape, and apparently 2 NFL teams are interested in drafting him. So good for
great stuff. And how's his knee?
I think his knee's pretty good for kneeling on.
Pretty bendy. Yeah.
I don't know.
That's good to know.
What will happen if that? I mean, he's probably going to kneel again, so we'll see.
Yeah.
It's time for the part of the show that this week, at least, is called "Televised Hearings Are Not a Logical Fallacy."
Oh my God, this has been so exciting, isn't it? Wow.
We've had, over the last 2 weeks, we've had 5 days of testimony, 12 witnesses, lots of stuff that we kind of already knew because we read the transcripts of the closed door testimonies that were released by the Democrats, by the House Intelligence Committee, I should say, rather than by the Democrats, because although the Democrats are in charge of the committee, there were plenty of Republicans on there.
Yes.
Yeah. But we've seen a lot of the information, but there was also new information that came out this week and last week. And
oh God, yeah.
The Republicans are desperately trying to spin it in their favor and failing dramatically and amusingly, and it's the kinds of defenses they're coming up with are quite kind of they basically Hail Mary defenses. They're not really anything. I can't imagine anyone thinks that they're going to actually be successful or thinks they are being successful. But the most important thing is that they pretend that they're being successful. Because that makes it true. So
yeah, because they do. Yeah, they are living in the speculatory future, aren't they?
They're living in a hypothetical world where no one is listening to all the bad things that people are saying about Trump.
No, and they're just listening to what they're saying. And all of their arguments as to why the things are insubmissible as evidence because people are drinking too much water or anything like that, or wearing fantastic glasses. I was completely taken with William Taylor's glasses. They're brilliant, aren't they?
They're kind of bendy wire around the side. It's brilliant.
It's so good. Yeah, that and George Kent's bow tie. I want that. That is now my impeachment outfit. I wear that whenever I'm watching it. And the whole Sondland bombshell was great, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was just beautifully delivered, and you kind of go, oh dear, right. Well, wait a minute.
This is kind of new information. Sondland previously had testified initially that there wasn't any quid pro quo, and then Bill Taylor testified in the closed-door testimony, and Sondland went back and said, my memory's been refreshed by Taylor's testimony. In fact, there was a quid pro quo, yes. Now I remember that I don't want to go to prison for perjury.
Yeah.
And...
that slipped my mind before.
And in the televised testimony, the hearings this week, Sondland did in his opening statement make it very clear that there was a quid pro quo, that Everyone knew about it in the White House. Everyone was in the loop. He brought an email that he had sent to multiple people, including Pompeo and Rick Perry and various others. This was in advance of the July 25th phone call with Trump. He emailed them to say that Zelensky knows that he needs to convince Trump that they are going to do investigations, and that will result in a good phone call. And
a beautiful phone call. Yep.
Yeah, a perfect one in the end. But from Bill Taylor's testimony at the end of the first week of hearings, in fact, the first day of hearings, included the kind of new information that Sondland in a cafe in Kyiv had spoken to Trump on the phone, and there were a couple of Taylor's staffers, or at least David Holmes, one of Taylor's staffers there, and another person who has also come forward and said, yes, this did happen, that Sondland called Trump on his cell phone from Kyiv, and they had a discussion about the investigations. Trump asked how they were going, and then having hung up the phone, David Holmes asked Sondland what Trump thought about Ukraine. And Sondland said he didn't really care about Ukraine. All he cared about was big stuff like the investigations into Biden.
Yeah.
So
good.
Yeah. It's basically everything seems to be pointing to Giuliani being the one who has told Sondland what to say and what to do and what the requirements are and what Zelensky had to do in order to get a meeting with Trump and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Little of it apparently, according to Sondland, came directly from Trump. It came from Giuliani, but Sondland says that Trump had told him to speak to Giuliani about this. And when that happens, when the president says, speak to this guy, and this guy tells you stuff, you assume it's coming from the president.
Yeah.
So
otherwise, why would you go talk to him? Yeah.
The Republicans are jumping on that desperately, saying, look, Trump didn't specifically say, I'm criming, I'm doing bribery. In fact, what they've jumped on is a phone call that Trump had with Sondland where Trump specifically said, I am not doing quid pro quo. I don't want anything. The thing that they seem to have missed about that is that happened in September, just as everything was becoming public.
Yeah. Weirdly, after everything else had happened. Yeah.
So that wasn't his initial instructions to Sondland.
Yeah.
That was him afterwards saying, don't tell anyone I'm doing a quid pro quo, basically.
So I don't want any of this. Yeah. With my with his Sharpie crib sheet. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That phone call apparently happened a couple of days after the one where he said that he told Sondland that Zelensky needed to get in front of a microphone and announce that he was doing investigations into Burisma.
Right.
So, who do you believe? Trump or Trump 2 days later after it looked like he was going to be found out? Hard to say.
Yeah. But it is that kind of the thing for me is that the Republicans they're almost implying, well, you know what? There isn't a smoking gun like there was for Nixon. It's kind of going, this isn't as bad as the other bad guy, so it can't be all that bad. I mean, but, with Nixon, it was really bad. So this is just bad. But it's still impeachable stuff.
They've tried so many different defences. They've tried saying that all of this is hearsay because none of them were there.
Yeah.
Which isn't what hearsay means.
No.
And several of the people who have testified, including Jennifer Williams and Alex Vindman. Incidentally, last episode, I inadvertently promoted Lieutenant Colonel Vindman to General.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. And I also said that he had served several ambassadorships when what I meant was that he had served in embassies, not as ambassador.
Okay.
I made a mistake.
We'll have to take a couple of pips off his shoulder.
Yes,
So he'll be writing to his lawyer.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman and Pence's security advisor Jennifer Williams and various others who did testify were on the call on July 25th and heard what Trump said, heard the inappropriate, unusual, as they characterized it, requests that Trump made, that it concerned domestic policy, not foreign policy. And that's not hearsay. Where hearsay legally requires an out-of-court statement that is being introduced in order to prove the truth of the statement.
Right.
So if someone said, I killed him, and in court you say, he said he killed him, that can't be used to prove he killed him.
Yeah.
But it can be used to prove he said he did. Because you're not using it to prove the truth of the statement. You're just using it to say, yes, I heard him say this. That's okay. That's not hearsay. It doesn't need to fall into one of the 23 exceptions to hearsay that there are that would allow hearsay to be introduced in a criminal trial.
Yeah.
Because it isn't hearsay if it's not being required to prove the truth of the statement. So all of the people who said, I heard Trump say this.
Isn't
hearsay.
You can't just squash that down into one portmanteau word into hearsay. I heard what he said. Well, that's just hearsay. No, I can hear what you're saying. Doesn't mean that's hearsay. Yeah.
And one of our Twitter followers, Curtis Franks, asked if this was equivocation or if there was another specific kind of fallacy that falls into of using hearsay essentially to mean I heard him say that.
Nice.
And I kind of think, yes, maybe there's a bit of equivocation in there. I think also it's just basically an ambiguity fallacy. It's basically saying it's stretching a meaning to mean, because they're not using, for equivocation, they really kind of need to be using hearsay in two different ways to mean two different things. They're just trying to stretch the accepted meaning of hearsay. Because,
to include hearing people say
anything
things.
People hear things say.
So, like the Ukraine premier heard Trump say to him, dig up some stuff on the Bidens, or we don't get any money. That kind of stuff. Is that hearsay, or did I just hear you say that? Yeah. Yes.
So Republicans have also tried to claim that this is only attempted bribery because Trump
didn't
released
actually
the funds.
happen.
Because on the 11th of September, after the whistleblower case, the case came out, the funds were released, and Zelensky never got to the point of actually announcing an investigation into the Bidens. It didn't happen, therefore there's no crime.
Yeah,
which is basically like saying the bomb I planted was found before it went off. Therefore, I'm fine. I'm not guilty of anything.
A bomber. I was in the book repository with a rifle, trained on the open top car, but I didn't shoot him. Somebody else shot him. Somebody else did it. So therefore, I'm not guilty of conspiring to shoot anyone.
Congressman John Ratcliffe suggested that it was important that none of the witnesses, he got out all of the kind of transcripts of the witnesses and slammed them down on the table and said none of them had mentioned bribery. None of them had said the word bribery. Or bribe. Therefore,
it's not bribery.
He's not guilty of anything because that's a requirement in a legal case, is that the witnesses specify the exact
crime that they're doing. Yeah. Well, he was a killer. He killed him
didn't say murder.
Didn't say murder. Didn't say murder. Yeah. So he's not guilty of murder. Yeah. In the first degree. Yeah.
Various people have tried to say Democrats have moved on from quid pro quo because quid pro quo didn't work. And now they've moved on to bribery. But that's not a thing, because quid pro quo is part of bribery.
Yes.
All they've done is they've clarified the legal crime that he committed. They've gone from, here is the evidence. The evidence includes the quid pro quo.
Yeah.
In fact, when Nancy did a press conference, talked about the fact that from the evidence, as far as she was concerned, he committed bribery. She was asked if they thought that although the Democrats were saying that they hadn't kind of made a decision on whether impeachment was going to go forward, whether actually it was a kind of foregone conclusion, and she said no, this is still in the inquiry stage, and she brilliantly trolled Trump. She said this:
"It's called an inquiry, and if the president has something that is exculpatory, Mr. President, that means you have anything that shows your innocence, then he should make that known, and that's part of the inquiry."
That's absolutely brilliant.
And she looked at the camera as well. Mr. President, you're watching that long word there. Yeah, that means, key. Very
so the
good.
Democrats have shifted to talking about bribery. They apparently, I don't know whether this is true, but the lots of reports have said that they had a focus group that asked people whether they should be continuing to say quid pro quo or saying bribery. And so Republicans are saying, look, they're even asking people what they should call it, and then they've gone with whatever the most popular thing was. It's they're calling it bribery because that's the law. It also helps that is specifically in the Constitution as one of the things you can impeach someone for.
Right.
But it is that bribery is the law that he broke. He requested a thing of value in return for it affecting his decision on doing his job, which was to release the aid and to have a meeting with Zelensky. So
and he would release the aid if he gave him the information, and he would get a meeting with him if he gave him, or if he got them to dig up stuff about Biden.
Well, if he made it,
and if he didn't, he wouldn't. Yeah.
One of the things in Sondland's testimony was that he didn't even necessarily need to get information. He didn't need to get evidence. What he needed to do was publicly announce that he was doing an investigation.
Looking for it. Yeah.
Because Trump knows from the boost he got in the polls when James Comey announced that the FBI were investigating Hillary. He knows that is useful to him. He knows that is a thing of value that he gets in terms of running against someone if someone announces there's an investigation into them. So that's what he wanted, was to get an announcement that the Ukrainians were investigating Biden. Also, in a kind of, I think probably the most desperate, Jim Jordan, who for some reason that no one quite understands, the Republicans kind of changed things to get Jim Jordan onto the House Intelligence Committee in advance of these hearings, as if that was going to make any difference. He suggested, in what seems like a kind of evidence weather balloon thing, that what Trump was doing was testing Zelensky to see if he was corrupt by asking him to do this.
Right.
Which is bizarre.
Yeah.
So it's kind of admitting that the request was corrupt.
Yeah.
But saying, well, I was just testing him. I wasn't actually going to go forward with it. But
which itself is a speculative argument, isn't it?
It doesn't fit in with any of the rest of their case at all.
No, that's another Giuliani kind of. It's not a crime, and even if it was a crime, it wouldn't be a criminal act, and it wasn't a crime because he didn't do it. But even if he did, that's just what the hell. That's such the kind of the slicing of the nuances are getting so thin that you can see straight through them.
The thing is, they have absolutely no response to the facts of the case. They can't. All of the people who they claim would be able to give evidence that is exculpatory are the people who are not allowed to testify. And basically what they're asking you to believe is that all the people wwho have agreed to testify under oath are lying, and all the people who haven't agreed to testify under oath are telling the truth.
Particularly when the very ones who are giving the most excoriating, Mr. President, that means, testimony, are Republicans. Who work for Trump.
Well, so they're absolutely. They're either Republicans or they are career civil servants who are either registered Republicans or have worked for Bush and or who agreed to come back into civil service specifically to work in the Trump administration. And including people like Vindman, who was still working in the White House, and people like Jennifer Williams, who works for Mike Pence, who Trump called a never-Trumper, despite the fact she is one of Mike Pence's senior
one of his always
security
Trumpers.
advisors.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. And all they have, basically, is ad hominems. All they can do is just attack the people.
Which is exactly what Trump did, isn't it? Mid-testimony from
for
Yovanovitch.
Yeah, from Maria Yovanovitch. Yeah, she
in the middle of it, he
witnessed tampered in real time.
Yeah, so he's doing impeachable offences in defence of his impeachment. You know, he's kind of trying to produce exculpatory evidence, you know, to stop the impeachment by doing other impeachable things, which is just amazing. And one of my favourite bits was Yovanovitch's careful avoidance of Schiff's leading the witness. There was a bit where he kind of leant forward and opened his eyes a bit. He's saying, well, that's quite intimidating, isn't it? And she carefully, it's meant to intimidate, isn't it?
Yeah. She said it's intimidating. He said it's designed to intimidate, isn't it?
Yeah. And he said, I don't know what's in the president's mind, but it was certainly intimidating. It was very carefully responded to, because in a way that in a very Mueller-esque kind of way, actually, that you think you've got to be careful what you say there. Otherwise, it leaves it open for the Republicans to say, oh, well, Schiff's leading the witness there.
Yeah. Absolutely,
she didn't. Yeah,
and she handled that really well. And in fact, one of the Republicans' other tactics has been to say, well, these witnesses, they, like Ratcliffe said, they haven't said bribery. They've said, they asked George Kent and Bill Taylor, what did he do that was impeachable? And they didn't have an answer for that. They did have an answer for it. And the answer was, that's not what we've been called to testify about, basically. We're not lawyers telling you what you should impeach someone for. We're telling you what happened. You have to make that decision.
Exactly
suggesting
the argument
these
they
people
tried
aren't
against
making a
Mueller.
legal decision on stuff.
Which is how kind of Mueller was treated by them as well, and he quite correctly said, "Well, it's not up to me to lay these charges. That is up to the legal system to do that. I'm just reporting my report."
So it was a couple of weeks. It was 5 days of testimony. There were some very powerful people testifying, very clearly patriotic, strong, important, intelligent people who were clearly trying to do the right things. Some of them, Fiona Hill particularly stood out as someone who was really, really strong in her testimony, was really clear about what she was saying. Her kind of, one of the key things that stood out for me in her was saying that she had listened to Gordon Sondland's testimony and actually kind of realised something she hadn't realised before, which was that when he was not coordinating with the people who were doing foreign policy in Ukraine, actually he was doing the right thing by not coordinating with them, because he wasn't doing foreign policy. He was doing domestic policy. He was an errand boy, basically. He was doing a domestic political errand, and he shouldn't have been getting involved with Fiona Hill and Bill Taylor, because they were trying to do the US's foreign policy. He was running a specific political errand for the president. So they were on different paths doing different things.
I've got American friends that are particularly impressed by Fiona Hill, and also that she, in her background, was saying that she couldn't have got as far as she has in American politics, in British politics, because of her kind of lowly background. She's kind of worked her way up through the ranks, and she wouldn't have had that opportunity in the UK, which is kind of testimony to anyone can be the president kind of stuff, ironically.
Yeah. We've taken anyone can be the president a bit too far. Yeah,
exactly. It's quite deliciously ironic that somebody who's come from a lowly, not that Trump ever came from a lowly background, but she's come from somewhere and grasped the opportunity afforded her by being in the US to reach the office that she's got, and she's doing it down to the president that anybody can become, which is
So, the testimony has now taken a break. The Congress have broken for Thanksgiving, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen next. Pelosi has said it's not over, but we don't. They haven't scheduled any more public hearings at the moment, or any more witnesses, at least. So we wait now to find out what happens next. And they could take a vote on whether to impeach now. But I think that they will probably wait and gather more evidence and more witnesses. But to be honest, it seems pretty clear what went on. There doesn't seem to be a lot of doubt, and everyone is saying the same thing largely. Everyone is there's not a lot of disagreement between witnesses,
and I think it's because they're realising the enormity of the wrongdoing that had gone on, and they are freed from what must have been a very intimidating atmosphere. They've got the chance now to speak freely with impunity, under the protection of the inquiry. So that's, who knows how many people are going to get thrown under the bus by Trump. I just wonder how long Giuliani's going to last. And well,
he's already under investigation, apparently.
And finally, some things we really don't have time to talk about.
It's good news, bad news for Trump associate Roger Stone this week. The good news is the gag order on him talking about his court case is no longer in effect. The bad news is that's because he's been found guilty on all counts of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and making false statements to the House Intelligence Committee, and faces up to 50 years in prison. It's not a huge surprise, since the prosecution provided a huge amount of documentary evidence and specifically mentioned that he has a tattoo of Richard Nixon's face on his back in their closing arguments, while his defence rested without calling a single witness. Some say Stone is holding out hope that Trump will pardon him, but he picked a bad week to be convicted. Trump's got more important things on his mind right now, so I guess it was good news, really bad news.
Previously vowing never to settle the case, charitable philanderer Donald J. Trump has been ordered to fork over $2 million to resolve a case brought by the state of New York into Trump FME using the Trump Foundation and the funds donated thereto for a shocking pattern of illegality, including unlawful coordination with the Trump presidential campaign and repeated and willful self-dealing. Well, as the saying goes, do what you know best. Oh, and also charity begins at home, as does having to pay the sins of the father, even unto the next generation. Faith, hope and charity. And the greatest of these is comeuppance.
Yeah, my favourite thing about that is actually the settlement required him not only to pay the $2 million, but also to admit wrongdoing. So they have to stipulate in court they have done the wrong thing. And now they are no longer allowed to run a charity because they're crooks. And the Trump children had to agree to training, basically, in order to be trained not to be shit at this stuff.
Trained not to be crooks. To kind of trained not to ignore the fact that the law is being broken.
When Giuliani associates and Ukrainian Cabbage Patch Kids Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman were arrested trying to flee the country, Trump pulled his usual trick of disavowing any knowledge of them, like his entire leadership style is based on the voice on the tape at the beginning of Mission Impossible. Apparently, Trump saying, "I don't know those gentlemen," hurt poor Lev's feelings, as he's now fired his lawyer, John Dowd, who you might remember from formerly being Trump's lawyer, and agreed to testify in the impeachment inquiry. Parnas says, on Giuliani's instructions, he and Fruman met with President Zelensky's aide and told him that unless they agreed to announce an investigation into the Bidens, the military aid would not be released, and even worse, Mike Pence wouldn't come to his inauguration party.
Adopting the somewhat familiar tone of trying to shake down an ally as part of a scheme that resembles a protection racket, our friends are uncomfortable with our demands, so we decided to stop talking to them until they agreed to pay us billions of dollars. Trump, who's never understood the value of having a US presence 7 seconds from North Korea's nascent nuclear missile arsenal, is demanding a 5-fold increase in the price to South Korea for the pleasure of having the US stationed troops there. Whilst they currently pay $1 billion for the privilege, he apparently plucked $4.7 billion out of thin air. And when the South Koreans, not surprisingly, expressed a little reluctance to having to find another $4 or so billion from their national economy, the Americans walked away from the table. Meanwhile, north of the DMZ, Little Rocket Man is not convinced that the US is wholly ending its hostile policy towards North Korea when cancelling joint military exercise with South Korea. Way to go, Donny, pissing off the good witch of the South and the wicked witch of the North in one go. It's just as well he's got good relations with the East and the West, or he'd have no friends on Earth whatsoever. Oh, no, wait a minute, hang on.
Don Jr.'s book, Triggered, was released last week, and while some are saying Jr. isn't smart enough to write a book, I think that's unfair. Mostly because you don't have to be smart to write something like this about your visit to Arlington National Cemetery. As we drove past the rows of white grave markers in the gravity of the moment, I had a deep sense of the importance of the presidency and a love of our country. In that moment, I also thought of all the attacks we'd already suffered as a family and about all the sacrifices we'd have to make to help my father succeed. The narcissistic shit really doesn't fall far from the tree. Junior has appeared on primetime TV multiple times to promote his book about how the left are silencing him, not to mention his nationwide book tour, which included an event where he was booed off the stage by Trump supporters for not being enough of a bigoted arsehole. He can take some comfort in hitting number 1 on the New York Times bestsellers list, but it's cold comfort thanks to the dagger-shaped asterisk next to the title that tells everyone it's only at the top thanks to bulk purchases from as-yet unknown sources. I would have said it was Trump Sr., but there's no way he cares enough about any of his children to spend that kind of money. Well, maybe Ivanka. But no, it turns out it's the RNC, which gave away a signed copy for every $50 donation. They spent almost $100,000 on copies of Little Donny's scribbles.
Trump press secretary number 257 we must be up to, Stephanie Grisham, declared, "Why is everyone so sensitive?" when she had to backtrack over lies she'd told about there being notes left behind by the Obama administration that said, "You will fail, you aren't going to make it." And in the press office, there was a big note taped to the door that said that you will fail. Members of the Obama administration rebutted her bald-faced lies and took to Twitter to share copies of what nice things they actually said to the incoming administration. In preparing us for laying the blame for the failure of the entire Trump saga at Obama's feet too, what Grisham has perhaps inadvertently revealed is the clairvoyance of those working for Obama, who thereby even now continue to bring the audacity of hope in a Trumpian dystopia.
Stephanie's had a busy week since last Saturday when she released a statement about Trump's totally normal, run-of-the-mill, last-minute, unscheduled trip to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Grisham claimed that the trip, which pool reporters were told not to announce until the president had arrived at the hospital, was just Donald taking advantage of a slow weekend to get a head start on some portions of his routine annual physical exam. You know how sometimes you're at home on a Saturday and you think, hey, it's been 8 months since I had my last annual checkup. Why don't I head over to the hospital and do part of next year's now to get it out of the way?
Yeah.
Never ones to see the value of consistency in a lie, the White House then released a memo from Trump's doctor calling the visit a routine, planned interim checkup, despite the fact that it was, unlike all other such checkups, not on his schedule. There has been some speculation that Trump is laying the groundwork for resigning on medical grounds, but I say, how dare people suggest that Trump plans ahead for something?
Brilliant. You remember the fence I built the summer before last, which cost 1/1000th the price of Trump's Mexican border wall? Turns out that not only could a Girl Scout scale mine just as easily as his, but the cutting through it with an electric power saw, which I had to do to replace a panel recently, Not because the Girl Scout getting a head stuck, we used a hammer for that, but because a car damaged one of them. Cutting through that is just as easy as cutting through Trump's. Smugglers have been down to Home Depot and bought a cordless jigsaw and passed goods through the resultant hole. Undaunted old Double Down Donald now says, we have a very powerful wall, but no matter how powerful, you can cut through anything in all fairness, but we have a lot of people watching. Which makes you think, why do you bother with the wall at all? Just have the people who watch. Or is it that the people crossing the border need to be spending some time drilling or climbing so that the people watching can actually see them? Don't anyone tell Trump diamonds are really difficult to cut, or Congress will be shut down again negotiating a new budget.
Presumably reasoning that 24-hour cable news plus the occasional butt-dialed phone call doesn't give him enough opportunities to confess to crimes, Trump's personal attorney and Halloween potato Rudy Giuliani has announced that he's thinking about starting a podcast to talk about the impeachment hearings. Back off, Rudy.
Whoa.
We and 17,000 other people were here first. Actually, I take that back. Please, Rudy, do it. If only for the possibility, let's face it, likelihood, that you'll accidentally upload some incriminating phone calls between you and Trump.
Halloween potato. That's great. Boris. They seek him here, they seek him there. It's been a period of sporadic appearances by the damned elusive blonde pimpernel. We are now in full electioneering mode and also winter flooding hitting the north of England, because of which Boris was invited, after 5 days of non-appearance, to declare a national emergency by none other than Jeremy Corbyn himself, and thus evoke national bodies to respond. Turning up in the affected zones, the grateful and relieved general public asked, well, where have you been, Boris? And one old woman described him as an arsehole on national TV. After appearing on time on a TV debate with Corbyn, he turned down the follow-up debate on another TV channel and even failed to turn up to the hustings in his own constituency. Remember, that's the one where he was called a toe rag by another old woman. Meanwhile, his party had been pretending not to be the Conservative Party, appearing to be an independent fact-checking service instead, when they changed the Tory party's own Twitter account into an account called Fact Check UK in order to trash Corbyn's statements during the said TV debate by spouting Tory propaganda as fact. And as we've heard earlier, they also bought the domain labourmanifesto.co.uk to further appear to be more things that they're not. So, even if people do vote for him and he does get in, you can guarantee that he will continue to not really be what he appears to be, except for the uncaring, self-serving, power-crazed, amoral twat that he's always been. He really does appear to be Trump.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this episode. You can find the show notes at fallaciostrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid and want to ask if it's a fallacy, our contact details are on the contact page.
If you think we've used the fallacy ourselves, let us know. And if you've had a good time, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can support the show on our Patreon page at patreon.com/ftrump.
You can also support us and get some great Christmas presents for the Trump haters in your life by going to our TeePublic store at fallaciostrump.com/tea, which is TEE, where you can find lots of pro-impeachment and anti-bad stuff themed clothing. All this week and next week there's a Thanksgiving/Black Friday sale on, so stock up for holidays in a way that also helps out your favourite fallacy-themed podcast.
My current favourite on there is Make Orwell Fiction Again. Really like that one. And and I colluded with the Russians, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt and the presidency. I love the fact that the presidency is after the T-shirt.
Second,
yeah. Second to a lousy T-shirt. Brilliant. Yeah. That and the whole anyone can become a president thing has gone way too far. Yeah, great. All music is by The Outbursts and was used with permission. So until next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right. Go home to mommy. Bye. Bye.